de atenções desde ainda antes do início dos treinos oficiais para a prova japonesa. Qualquer deles foi amplamente interrogado sobre o que pensava que iria acontecer, sobre as suas táticas possíveis, sobre o que poderia vir a suceder na pista. A qualquer deles foi colocada a questão, é evidente, daquela colisão entre ambos o ano passado aqui na chicane, que acabou por decidir o título em favor de Alain Prost. Curiosamente, qualquer deles também referiu que ali não é possível ultrapassar. Portanto, não será de esperar uma cena como a do ano passado. Os treinos viveram essencialmente do duelo entre as equipas McLaren, Honda e Ferrari, é evidente. Os outros ficaram um tanto atrás. Basta ver que a diferença entre o quarto Nigel Mansell e Thierry Boutsen, o quinto, é bastante superior à diferença entre Mansell e Senna, que está na pole position, e a Ayrton Senna conseguiu aqui no Japão a sua 51ª pole position. No entanto, Alain Prost também pode considerar-se que cumpriu uma parte do seu contrato. Ele queria a pole position, mas ficou pelo menos com a primeira linha ao lado de Ayrton Senna, e ambos vão arrancar lado a lado. Aliás, neste momento...
Soweit also Gerhard Berger, Freitag hier in Suzuka, schnellster wie oft am Freitag eines Grand Prix-Wochenendes, gestern auf den 4. Platz zurückgefallen durch ein nicht ganz faires Manöver von Alain Prost, der Berger in seiner schnellsten Runde blockiert hat. Für Prost ging es um einen Platz in der ersten Startreihe, sehr, sehr wichtig, diesen Platz hat er geholt. Er steht also neben Ayrton Senna. Sennas Pole Position, Prost neben ihm in der zweiten Reihe, Nigel Mansell, der bei Ferrari heute die Aufgabe haben wird, Gerhard Berger am Start zu blockieren. Das hat Alain Prost gestern ganz klar und eindeutig auch ausgesprochen, und Gerhard Berger ist in der zweiten Reihe auf dem 4. Startplatz. Seit Budapest im ungarischen Grand Prix war Gerhard Berger also nicht mehr vor Ayrton Senna in der Startaufstellung. Warum der Streit um die Pole Position? Senna muss rechts innen starten, in Fahrtrichtung gesehen. Glaubt aber, dass der wesentlich bessere Startplatz...
Warm-up, John. Well, I have to say, I think it's a little bit of both. The gamesmanship has been rife all weekend between Ferrari and McLaren. But yesterday I spoke to Steve Nichols.
There we go, cars on the warm-up lap now. This is a fantastic racetrack in Suzuka. Enormous crowds get here. Very, very challenging and very, very fast. Over 300 kilometres an hour down the back straight. And it is a very, very challenging circuit. You really have to know what you're about here, passing and also setting yourself up, because you can really get it wrong here. If you go into these set of corners here wrong, you really do blow it for the rest of the lap.
Well, there's some very fast corners here. It's a great circuit. I love racing on it. I raced there in '87 for Toyota, and we did a lot of races there, and I really do like the circuit. It's a very demanding circuit. It's quite difficult to set the car up because you have these big, long, sweeping corners which require a lot of downforce, and then you've got some real sharp hairpins, and it's quite difficult to gear the car for it. But it's quite interesting to note that Honda have got their Series 6 engine for this particular meeting, and Ferrari have got their Phase 6 engine. So the new Honda engine is 2 kilos lighter. It's developing a little bit more horsepower right through the rev range, and they've brought that out for this meeting. And Ferrari have got their Phase 6 engine, which is the latest development. And apparently they have a very good engine for Prost, reputedly putting out about 730 brake horsepower. So I wouldn't be at all surprised if that's what he's got in the car for the race. And the two Ferraris were quickest in the morning warm-up. So I think we could be in for a real good one.
Nigel Mansell has vowed that he will drive to help Prost win the championship or win today's race, and Berger said, I'll think about it, from the McLaren's point of view. OK, let's go live now to Suzuka. James Hunt and, of course, Murray Walker, your commentators.
Welcome, Australia, to Suzuka, Japan, and the closing stages of the parade lap for round 15 of the World Championship, the race which here in Japan is going to decide whether the World Championship is finished in Adelaide or here at Suzuka. And the hot news from Suzuka is, first of all, that Jean Alesi, the Frenchman in the Tyrrell Ford, will not be starting in today's Japanese Grand Prix because he still has whiplash injuries from a practice shunt. And the other hot news is that Ayrton Senna, and there he is starting from the right-hand side of the grid, much to his annoyance. The right-hand side is pole position, and the track is dirty there. Senna asked for the pole position to be changed from the left to the left. His decision, his request rather, was refused, and the result is that Alain Prost, starting from second on the grid on the left-hand side, is actually going to have a start advantage at a circuit where passing is virtually impossible, except at the notorious chicane where Alain Prost and Ayrton Senna, both in McLarens last year, collided, and we all know what happened subsequently. Ayrton Senna went on to win the race only to be disqualified. Prost and Senna have made up their feud now, and we are waiting for the start of this 53-lap race. On the left is Ayrton Senna, on the right is Alain Prost, behind Senna is Mansell, behind Prost is Berger. The grid is clear, the lights go, and Senna sprints away, but Alain Prost takes the lead. It's happened. Alain Prost has taken the advantage. Senna is trying to go through on the inside, and it's happened immediately. This is amazing. Senna goes off at the first corner, but what has happened to Prost? He has gone off too. Well, that is amazing, but I fear absolutely predictable.
Yes, and that makes Ayrton Senna world champion this year. So Ayrton Senna now with Prost not finishing the race quite clearly. He's out of his car, stuck in the gravel pit. That, I'm afraid to say, is the end of this year's Drivers' World Championship in favour of Ayrton Senna. There's Prost running back, but it's all over for him.
Well, that was predictable, I'm afraid. The man who got to the first corner first was going to be the world champion if they got Ranadella again.
Having said all that, of course, we could have a restart to this race. There's the two cars in a very dangerous position, and if the race is stopped, well, they're moving them, so if they get a move, and as yet there is no red flag.
And as you can see, Senna's teammate Gerhard Berger, the man who was fastest on Friday in qualifying, only to go down to fourth on the grid for the start of the race, is now leading the Japanese Grand Prix, which is going to be anticlimactic from now on. Chased by Nigel Mansell in second position. There are the start officials. In third position it's Piquet, and in fourth place it's Johnny Herbert. This is incredible. Johnny Herbert, the young Englishman who last drove in a Grand Prix. Sorry, it's Roberto Moreno, and Johnny Herbert is in the Lotus, of course. Here is the restart.
Yes, one of the best starts of the season by Alain Prost. Senna looking down the inside. Now, he didn't make it into the corner. Prost kept hard into the corner. He knew Senna was there, but he was relying on Senna just to be able to get a bit onto the brake pedal. And that's a very sad way for this year's very exciting World Championship to finish.
And that is Gerhard Berger off. Well, what an amazing Japanese Grand Prix, because before the second lap even, Gerhard Berger is off, and into the lead goes Nigel Mansell. Let us recap then. At the first corner, Senna and Prost, the World Championship contenders, collide, and they are both out of the race, which gives the championship to Ayrton Senna. Then Gerhard Berger goes off, and now a terrific race at the front between Nigel Mansell that you're looking at now, Nelson Piquet in the Benetton, and sensationally, Brazilian Roberto Moreno having his first real Grand Prix drive, because up to now he has been in inadequate cars. Now he is driving the Benetton that Alessandro Nannini, last year's winner, would have driven had he not had his dreadful helicopter accident. And the news is that Alessandro Nannini is making as good a recovery as can be expected, is expected to be discharged from hospital next week, and has been talking to Nelson Piquet on the start line in Japan from his hospital. So now Nigel Mansell, number 2, driving his last but one race for Ferrari, leads the Japanese Grand Prix. In fourth position it is Thierry Boutsen, fifth is Riccardo Patrese, and up into sixth position has come the Lotus, and it looks like Derek Warwick to me as they go through the chicane, and it is Derek Warwick, who has signed for Jaguar in 1991 in sports car racing, perhaps a day too soon, with the knowledge that a Benetton seat would possibly have been available to him. But now Nigel Mansell, having already won only one Grand Prix for Ferrari in Portugal this year, is out on his own. He can drive a careful race. He's got a faster car and probably a better handling car. That's Alex Fiorio on the right, talking to Steve Nichols, the Ferrari designer, on the left. And they've got one of their cars in the lead. So one leads Ferrari, Mansell, there he is, and one out, Alain Prost. Walking back to the pits now. There is the Frenchman, Alain Prost. And the Japanese Grand Prix is not going to be his, nor is the World Championship. But Prost is again going to finish second in the World Championship. Mansell leads, Piquet second, and Moreno third.
Yes, and Mansell now being pressed by the two Benettons. Very interesting it will be to see what Moreno can do in the Benetton, having replaced Nannini in the team, and certainly he's making a good showing, extremely good showing so far. There is Mansell, really happy to have inherited the lead, but what an extraordinary race. Within less than 2 laps, we had 3 of the top 4 contenders for the race all out of it, and Berger, to his, I should think, immense chagrin, just threw it away, what looked like a mistake of his own. Couldn't see definitely if that was the case, but it certainly looked to me like a mistake with no pressure, a completely unforced error, when in quite a comfortable lead of the race. Now Mansell leads the two Benettons, the Williams is behind.
Yes, so it's Piquet second, Moreno third, Boutsen fourth, Patrese fifth, Derek Warwick sixth. In 7th position is Aguri Suzuki, the Japanese driver in the Larousse Lola with the Lamborghini engine. And of course, Aguri Suzuki, who has actually scored 2 World Championship points this year from 2 6th places, has got a big advantage at Suzuka. He said the other day, I could drive round Suzuka blindfold, I know it so well, and that is going to be an enormous advantage to him here. He's got what should be a reliable V12 Lamborghini engine behind him. He is going well. He's in 7th place. There is the confirmation of the positions, and as you can see, it is Nigel Mansell in the V12 semi-automatic gearbox Ferrari. There is Piquet. Nelson Piquet, 3 times world champion, the Brazilian, 1981, 83, 87, who has driven for, of course, Brabham for 7 years, then on to Lotus, and now in a car where he can show his talent, and he's still got plenty of it left, the Benetton.
Yes, but a good move by the Benetton team, putting Roberto Moreno. There's Ayrton Senna walking back. But he'll be the one person of the 3 top men who have already departed this race who really won't mind. I'm sure he'll be very happy to have won the World Championship. That was his main, well, his sole objective for this year, sole main objective. And I'm sure he'll find it sad that it should finish that way. He would have much preferred, I'm sure, to have won it outright on the track. But winning is winning, and with that he has to be satisfied. In the Benetton team, bringing Moreno in, as I was saying before I interrupted myself there, he will certainly help to keep Nelson Piquet honest. Moreno is a very talented driver indeed. This is the first time he has driven a competitive Formula 1 car, but he does have some Formula 1 experience, and he was a tremendous driver, top man in Formula 3000 in his...
We had a difficult start here, and Prost was half a car in front of me on the first corner. I tried to take it inside line. He didn't see me or whatever, and he closed the door and we touched and we both went out.
But is this the way you like to be? I mean, this is not the way you wanted to win World Championship.
I want to win the race today and win the championship that way, but some races happen this way. It goes wrong on the first corner. It happened to me in the past many occasions. Sometimes it happens at the end of the race, like it happened last year, as you all remember, and that's the way it went. I think we had a beautiful championship this year. It has been an amazing fight, big fight. It was not easy, there was a lot of pressure, and we did enough work to achieve the championship.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
Roberto Moreno, And the drive of the race thus far, and we're only on lap 5 out of 53, has to be Roberto Moreno. He's demonstrating that given the machinery, he can do the job, because Moreno has been racing for a very, very long time. He's 31 years old, and there is Thierry Boutsen, who has won a Grand Prix this year, of course, in Hungary, and will be driving for Ligier next year, in 4th position ahead of his teammate Riccardo Patrese in 5th place. It is still Derek Warwick in 6th place. Aguri Suzuki is 7th. Johnny Herbert is in 8th position in his first drive in the Lotus. In 9th place, it is Satoru Nakajima. In 10th position, it is Pierluigi Martini. 11th is Eric Bernard. And in 12th place, it is Maurizio Guterman in the Leighton House. Piquet. Now, this Japanese Suzuka circuit, which has a lap length of 3.64 miles, is unique these days in that it has a crossover. It is a sort of distorted figure 8 in terms of shape, and Suzuka's got a crossover point. You can see there is Roberto Moreno in 3rd position, chasing his teammate, and of course there's no question of a race between Moreno and Piquet. Roberto regards himself as extremely lucky to have the Benetton drive. He will be endeavouring to demonstrate that he can drive a quick, reliable race and obey team orders. We're with Nigel Mansell now in the semi-automatic gearbox Ferrari. Now, driver's eye view of Suzuka, and there are some very, very quick places here on this Japanese circuit, and Nigel Mansell now will be sizing up the apex points underneath the bridge now. And Suzuka is a circuit where you can certainly build up to, as at most Grand Prix circuits these days, about 180 miles an hour. Off goes one of the Leighton House cars, and it's Maurizio Gugelmin. Gugelmin out then. And he was in about 12th position. In fact, he was 12th position, Maurizio Gugelmin, and he's gone out on lap 6. So Senna is out, Prost is out, Gugelmin is out. 3 of the top runners. Jean Alesi didn't start. So this is the 3rd race in succession where only 25 people have started. Portugal, Spain, and now Japan.
Yes, and there's Nigel Mansell now really starting to stretch it. He's settled into the race. Tyre wear is marginal here, so he will want to look after his tyres, treat them as gently as he can while still building a lead slowly. He won't want to go herring away, but of course one wants the luxury of at least, say, 10 seconds by the time a tyre stop becomes potentially necessary. Now, Roberto Moreno in the Benetton, of course, has done very little long-distance Grand Prix type driving in this year, and although, however fit he may have maintained himself in terms of training outside the car, there's no substitute for fitness acquired in the car, that extra bit that gives you the edge. And both Moreno and even his team, the Benetton, are worried about his ability physically to last this long, hard race. Remember, Suzuka's very hard on the neck and the body because it's got a lot of high-speed sweeps, and these create tremendous G-forces.
James, it's fairly static at the moment. There is inevitably going to be a lot of discussion about that first corner coming together between Senna and Prost. It's the 2nd time it's happened in 2 years at Suzuka. Would you ascribe any blame to either driver? Prost was in the lead and moving in. Senna was trying to go through on the inside again.
Yes, well, I certainly would have to ascribe the blame to Senna there, in that he got inside and was unable to slow up enough as Prost turned in to make an apex on the corner. However, having said that, when you look at it from Prost's point of view, then, because of course from Senna's point of view, he really doesn't mind. The fact that they're both out of the race for him is a very good result, because it has won him the World Championship. And that, of course, is far and away his most important objective at the moment. As far as Prost was concerned, though, it's a different matter, because Prost knows he has to win, that he had to win this race in order to maintain his World Championship hopes. knowing also that by Senna putting him out of the race would also lose him the World Championship, I think really he should have maybe just left a little bit more room and allowed Senna to attack, because he did have a second chance to pass him even without overtaking him on the road if Senna had got inside. I think he should have closed the door, but a little bit more slowly, because of course with the pit stops that is a chance to pass without overtaking anybody.
Well, there we are, that's history. You can see the first three are as they were. Ivan Capelli in the Leighton House is the man who was in the pits, and the race order is still as it was, with Nigel Mansell striding away in what he will hope is a reliable Ferrari, on his way, hopefully from his point of view, to his second Grand Prix win of 1989, chased by the two Benettons. But as both James and I have said, and will probably say again repeatedly during this race, the man of the race so far is Roberto Moreno. That is Hungarian Grand Prix winner of 1990, Thierry Boutsen, his teammate Riccardo Patrese, who will be driving for Williams again next year, chasing Boutsen, the Belgian, who's going to be with Ligier in 1991. And then in sixth position, it's now Aguri Suzuki, who has moved up ahead of Derek Warwick, seventh. Eighth is Johnny Herbert, so the two Lotus cars, which have given a lot of trouble this year, particularly in the handling area, with a dreadful crash for Derek Warwick at Monza, and an even worse one, of course, for the unfortunate Martin Donnelly in Spain. And I'm glad to say that Martin Donnelly is progressing. He is still under sedation in hospital in London, but according to the medical authorities is making as good progress as could be expected under the appalling circumstances. So Herbert going well, like Moreno, both in their first Grand Prix in a real car this season.
Yes, indeed. And that this, of course, is a very, very important break for Moreno, because it's his first time, as we've said, in a competitive car. I hope for his sake that his fitness isn't too bad. There, in the background there were Piquet and Moreno coming round, and he certainly, so far in this race, Moreno has looked very comfortable sitting behind Piquet. He's quite clearly not pressing him or trying to pass, and in a way I think that's a mistake, because apart from anything else, Moreno really should be looking to do something to establish that drive for himself for next year, because Nannini sadly, as we watch from Mansell's cockpit, now watching from outside it, and Mansell slowly edging away, but Moreno will certainly, and the gap now 3.3 seconds. Moreno should certainly have his eye on that Benetton drive next year, at least until Nannini declares his fitness, if hopefully he will ever be able to. But that certainly was a huge tragedy. It's interesting that private flying has, over the last 15 or 20 years in Grand Prix racing, probably cost as many lives, if not more, than the track. Of course, Nannini is, of course, it didn't take his life, but shall I say, ended people's careers.
There is a very strong rumour here at Suzuka that the second Benetton next year could be driven by the young American Mike Andretti, son of Mario Andretti. It is only a rumour, but we'll soon know whether it is going to be confirmed, because Benetton have booked the Suzuka track for post-race test, the Autopolis track in Japan for post-race testing. And a lot of people are expecting Mike Andretti to be appearing there. We'll see. Meantime, this is the notorious chicane that Nigel Mansell has just gone through. Now he goes up the start and finish straight in fifth gear on at about 170 miles an hour as he approaches turn one, the 180-degree right-hander, chased by Piquet there, Moreno there, Boutsen there in fourth place, Then it is Piquet. There in the background is Aguri Suzuki, the Japanese driver, in 6th place, chased by the 2 Lotuses of Derek Warwick, 7th. Behind him, Johnny Herbert, 8th. 9th is Satoru Nakajima, the 2nd Japanese driver. 10th there is Eric Bernard. And here is Pierluigi Martini in 11th position. And 12th is Philippe Alliot.
Yes, now Nakajima, who we just saw in his Tyrrell, is the only starter from the Tyrrell team because Jean Alesi had a big accident yesterday in qualifying, and that has given him some seriously torn muscles in the neck, and not only is he not driving today, he's doubtful for Australia. That means that, strangely enough, it's the 3rd Grand Prix on the trot that we've only had 25 starters, because Nakajima himself had an accident in practice in the warm-up in Portugal and withdrew from the race, and then of course Donnelly was withdrawn from the race. Now this is a terrific view from Mansell's cockpit. We're back outside it now, and Jean Alesi, withdrawn from today's race, is a man to whom I owe an apology after the Spanish Grand Prix. In the excitement and heat of the moment, I misjudged the first lap accident, and I judged it to have been his fault. On closer examination, since I got home, I totally withdraw that. Having seen the accident on proper replay, it's quite clear that Gerhard Berger got himself boxed at the start and then tried to muscle his way out, which is very much Berger's style, and you're entitled to try. But he nudged Alesi and pushed, and Alesi therefore got pushed into Patrase's Williams, and at that point his rear wheel got punctured, the wheel broke, and the car was no longer controllable. So that accident was certainly caused by Gerhard Berger and not Jean Alesi, as I stated a couple of weeks ago.
Yes, I'd like to join you in eating humble pie, James, because I accused Alesi at the time of stupid and precipitate driving, and I take it all back. Now, I feel very sorry for Australia, who had desperately hoped that at Adelaide, which is going to be the 500th World Championship Grand Prix, the Drivers' Championship would be decided. Well, that is not going to be the case, but here is an interesting point. It is not inconceivable that the Constructors' Championship could be decided in Adelaide, because when the Japanese Grand Prix started, McLaren were only 18 points ahead of Ferrari, and that is a very small gap for McLaren these days. But now, with amazingly both Senna and Berger out of the Japanese Grand Prix, it means that McLaren will score no points. And although Alain Prost is out for Ferrari, Nigel Mansell is very much in and leading the race. And if he stays where he is, and really the car only has to be reliable for Mansell to stay where he is and win, Ferrari will score 9 points, which means to say that the 16th and last round of the World Championship in Adelaide will see McLaren leading Ferrari in the Constructors' Championship by only 9 points. And it would be a rich and well-deserved reward for either team if they win the Constructors' Championship. But this year, it looks as though Mansell staying where he is at the moment, it could be Ferrari. There is Roberto Moreno in 3rd position. There has been not a single change in the first 6 places in the first 12 laps, except for Aguri Suzuki moving up to 6th position ahead of Derek Warwick on the 7th lap. And we're on lap 13 at the moment with the race order. Nigel Mansell leading Nelson Piquet. There is Mansell by just over 3 seconds. Roberto Moreno tucked politely and in a disciplined way behind his new teammate Nelson Piquet in 3rd position, ahead of the 2 Williams Renaults of Thierry Boutsen and Riccardo Patrese. Within 6th place, Aguri Suzuki. 7th and 8th, the 2 Lotus cars of Derek Warwick and Johnny Herbert. And Herbert is doing himself absolutely no harm at all here in Japan. In 9th place, it is Satoru Nakajima. So both the Japanese drivers are in the top 9 places. And if they weren't already heroes in Japan, they certainly would be now. In 10th position, it's Eric Bernard. In 11th place, it is Pierluigi Martini. 12th is Nicola Larini. In 13th place, it is Emanuele Pirro, despite the fact that he's got a very nasty knock on his knee after a practice crash. And then behind him, Gianni Morbidelli driving in the second Dallara, followed by then it's Alex Caffey and Michele Alboreto in the two now rather past it Arrows cars, which are going to be called Footwork Porsches next year, incidentally. And last at the moment in 18th place is Philippe Alliot, and lapped, I'm sorry, there are actually 19 running at the moment because Ivan Capelli, who we saw go into the pits, has been lapped. So that, number 30, is Aguri Suzuki, the man who this season has not only driven the Lola LaRousse, but has driven for Toyota in Group C racing. And just as last year the Japanese showed us the speeds of the cars with a simulated speedometer, last year it was the two McLarens. Just as well it's not the two McLarens this year. This year it is Aguri Suzuki, and you saw how quickly he was going there. It's in Japanese parlance a throttle position indicator. Nigel Mansell. And Nigel is in the most terrific form. He has been positively ebullient in practice. All the indecision about whether he was going to drive or not going to drive, and whether he was going to Peugeot or whether he was going somewhere else, has been put behind him now with the knowledge. And there is Capelli in the pits again. It's obviously a very sick Leighton House that he's driving. And Nigel Mansell with the flame that used to worry me until James repeatedly pointed out that the turbo days are over, and we're seeing that in the Ferrari in race after race. It's some trick of the induction system. And by the way, there is one of the Dallaras out, and that's De Cesaris. Well, De Cesaris started 26 on the grid. He just lost it. It's very, very slippery here at Suzuka. A lot of people, including Ayrton Senna, went off in practice. So Mansell leads, and I was saying all the indecision is behind him. He's driving the Williams Renault next year, and the Renault people have said here in Japan that, notwithstanding the fact that they have been making a big effort with Williams for the last 2 years, it's nothing compared with the effort that they're going to be making next year, with the knowledge that they've got one of the world's 3 top drivers. Because sadly, I have to say now that on this year's performance, when I used to say Senna, Prost, Berger and Mansell were the top 4 drivers, I would say now that Prost, Senna and Mansell are the top 3 drivers, because once again Gerhard Berger has done it all wrong.
Yes, certainly I would agree with you, Murray, on 2 points. One is he most definitely did it all wrong today, because he wasn't under threat of his lead, and maybe one can say that it's been a very long time since he won a race and that sort of thing, and he got overexcited. But of course, if you're going to get overexcited, that's just by the prospect of winning a race, because as early as that, you've seen the 2 main contenders go. Berger knew that all he had to do, or theoretically, was go along nicely and stand up to win, but he didn't manage to stand up. But and certainly on speed, the trio of Senna, Prost and Mansell would appear to be the marginally quicker than Berger. But Berger is really an ideal number 2 to Ayrton Senna, because he's quick enough to keep Senna honest. He's not the quickest of drivers, but he is very, very close. He's, in my estimation, he's really not quite a full number 1 team driver, a top man, but he's certainly better than any of the other number 2s around. He's more than a number 2, but not quite a top flight number 1 driver.
So Williams Renault have got one of the top 3 next year, and they really are going to be making a mega effort. And we have the prospect in 1999, therefore, of seeing the Senna-Prost rivalry in McLaren and Ferrari cars renewed, but joined by Nigel Mansell, with Renault trying even harder.
Yes, now here we've got the speed indicator, and the percentage sign there indicates the amount of power being delivered to the engine, whether it's actually throttle opening or what. But anyway, well, as soon as you see 100%, you know he's on a straight. With his foot screwed right down, and now we're looking out of Mansell's car. This is what it looks like to be leading a Grand Prix. We can't see in his mirror, but he won't see much. He won't be seeing anybody in his mirror. He's got a big enough lead now that even if they're on the same straight, the mirrors don't give you a very good view. They rather lengthen the image that you get. And now past the pits. Over the start-finish line goes Nigel Mansell, and now you'll see him on the brakes, down through the gearbox and into turn one, but we've moved.
And we look now at Thierry Boutsen in 4th place, Riccardo Patrese 5th, and Aguri Suzuki, who's actually closing up on the Williams a bit, in 6th position. Now, after Portugal, Nigel Mansell was very emotional. That is Nakajima in the Tyrrell. Nigel was very emotional. Warwick, Johnny Herbert, and Nakajima is catching Herbert, and I'll get this out in a minute, but Nigel Mansell was actually very emotional about the fact that his 16th win had enabled him to equal the record of the truly great Stirling Moss in winning that number of Grand Prix, and thereby joining Moss as the most successful English as opposed to British, because let us not forget that Jim Clark and Jackie Stewart had both won more races than Stirling Moss. But it looks now, if Nigel stays where he is, as though he's going to pass Stirling Moss's great record, because this would be Nigel Mansell's 17th race. But as I have said many times in the past, a race is not won until the checkered flag has been seen by the man who is at the front at the time. And Nigel Mansell is now on lap 17. It's a 53-lap race. There's a long way to go, and this capacity crowd of Formula One crazy Japanese are not getting the exciting race that they hoped to see. They've had the World Championship resolved, but they will be all agog. There is an enormous interest in Japan in Grand Prix racing, because so many of the teams are sponsored or backed very heavily by Japanese concerns. You think of them, you see McLaren is using a Honda engine, Tyrrell have got a lot of Japanese money behind them and are using Honda engines next year. Then the Brabham team is Japanese owned, so is the Arrows team, to the extent that it's actually going to be called Footwork next year. The Leighton House team is a Japanese organisation in terms of ownership. The Lola team is owned by a Japanese concern, and so Japan is very much a dominant force in terms of money, but not really in terms of technology, except of course for the enormous contribution that Honda have made. And once again it looks as though the Japanese Grand Prix at the Suzuka circuit, which is owned by Honda, is not going to be won by, in fact it can't be won by a Honda-propelled car. In 1987, the first Japanese Grand Prix at Suzuka, it was a Ferrari who won, Gerhard Berger. Then, in 1988, Ayrton Senna won in a McLaren Honda, to the joy of the Japanese. Last year, of course, although Senna finished first after that contentious coming together with Alain Prost, it was to be disqualified and to allow Alessandro Nannini in the Benetton Ford to be adjudged the victor. So out of 3 Grand Prix so far, Honda and Japan have only won 1, and they are certainly not going to win this one.
Nigel Mansell on the softer C compound is expected to make a pit stop. The gap between the Ferrari and the 2 Benettons is currently just under 5 seconds. That's not enough of a gap to allow Mansell to make a pit stop and to try and take advantage of some fresh tyres. He would lose quite a lot of time coming in. It's a very long pit entry here, and you've got a very, very tight little chicane just before the beginning of the pit lane proper. So maybe Mansell now really is trying to take care of those softer C compound tyres and maybe try and avoid the pit stop that he believes that the Benettons won't want to make.
Yes, Nigel Mansell leads the race. Japanese Grand.
Now, Nakajima, local Japanese driver, and you saw the Lotus of Johnny Herbert, I think that was, going a little bit wide and sliding a lot, but he held it well. But it was a little mistake from Johnny Herbert, and it is indeed Herbert in his first Grand Prix for quite a long time, and let's wish him very well indeed, because he has suffered the most appalling rehabilitation from that huge accident he had at Brands Hatch 2 years ago, and still isn't 100% fit in movement with what was a very badly broken leg, but it's coming. And it would be tragic, though, if that accident has taken the sparkle off the really outstanding talent that Johnny Herbert showed up to the time of his accident, and even afterwards, by running into 4th place in his first ever Grand Prix in Brazil, and really showing tremendous form in the Benetton team. But then he couldn't press the brake pedal, he got damaged, and from that accident it held up his rehabilitation.
So there is the ad, and off goes the second. That's Morbidelli. Morbidelli going off. Gianni Morbidelli, the Italian, driving in his first Grand Prix for the Minardi team, joins Maurizio Gugelmin out of the race, Senna out of the race, Prost out of the race, and Satoru Nakajima in 9th position, challenging. Nakajima, who has been written off by a lot of people, is certainly not one of the very top men, but he's no slouch. And of course in Japan he's getting an enormous adrenaline charge from the fact that he is in front of his countrymen on a circuit which he, like Suzuki, knows extremely well. And Johnny Herbert in 8th place has got number 3, Satoru Nakajima, getting closer and closer all the time. And behind Nakajima is Eric Bernard. Now there is Herbert. Nakajima, look for the next man. There he is, it's Eric Bernard. So both the Lola LaRousse Lamborghini cars are well up. And now we're riding with race leader Nigel Mansell.
Is a pretty good view from Mansell's cockpit, or was, and now through that very, very slow first gear chicane, and away to start another lap under the start-finish line. You get quite a good impression when looking at the onboard camera. If you look at Mansell's hands, or whichever driver, into the pits comes Riccardo Patrese. Sorry, Thierry Boutsen, that is. I do beg your pardon. Boutsen into the pits. And that looked a little bit more than just a tyre stop to me, but maybe it was just the bumps that were making the car wander. And there's something wrong at the left rear. And I couldn't see what they were checking, but they seemed to be checking something. It may be that they weren't sure whether the wheel was properly on. It goes onto a set of pegs which very accurately pin the wheel, and because they hold it against the drive, and it's quite a tight fit. It has to be. And sometimes the wheels won't go fully on, and sometimes they're very difficult to get off because of those pegs as well.
Nigel Mansell out on his own. It's an ideal race, of course, for him. He's got a clear circuit in front of him. It's going to be some time before he laps anybody, but he is far enough in front of Nelson Piquet in 2nd place to be able to drive very much his own race. There is Nelson Piquet and Roberto Moreno. What a wonderful drive by the cheerful little Brazilian who has tried so hard for so long to get his talent recognised. It was recognised, but somehow or other, Moreno always got overlooked when there was a decent drive going, until Benetton. There's Mansell, Piquet, until Benetton needed a test driver. There is Roberto Moreno, 3rd place in the background, and of course now Riccardo Patrese has moved up to 4th position. You just saw him coming round the right-hander there, with now that Thierry Boutsen has gone into the pits. And that means to say that Aguri Suzuki is now in 5th position. Boutsen, after a long pit stop, 13 seconds, is down.
Yes, and of course for the two non-regular Grand Prix drivers there is a question mark of fitness, but Moreno is showing so far that he's having no problem staying with Piquet. And behind them, Johnny Herbert, well, Herbert is also staying right with Derek Warwick, and there's no one stronger than Derek Warwick, and of course that pit stop by the Williams has moved Herbert up into 6th place, and there's the caption.
Yes, Derek Warwick is in the pits now, so he's taking on new tyres. So as you see, Suzuki moves up into 5th position. Johnny Herbert, on his reappearance in Grand Prix racing, is in the points on lap 22 out of 53, and we should be getting quite a few tyre stops now. Boutsen has been in. We've had Capelli in a long time ago, but that was for something other than a tyre stop. And the tyre stop from Ferrari and Nigel Mansell that we're with now should not affect his position. Indeed, he might even... No, he wouldn't get out again in 1st place. In which case, now this could be interesting. We don't know for sure, but Nigel Mansell is in fact going to stop. I believe that he is on the Goodyear B compound, which is the harder of the tyre compounds available. No, he's on C, so he will definitely have to be coming in, whereas the Benettons are definitely on B tyres, which are a harder compound, and that means they may not have to come in. Not definitely that they won't have to come in which case it's not inconceivable that Nelson Piquet and Roberto Moreno could move up into 1st and 2nd places, and then Nigel Mansell would have a real fight on his hands. But all this is hypothesis, because Mansell has not shown any sign yet of coming in for a new set of tyres.
Well, with 22 laps now completed, it's very much pit stop time, and so for those who are going to make pit stops, it's a 53 lap race, so half distance is lap 26, and of course to use both sets to their best advantage, to get the best out of them, one should certainly be stopping by now. It's somewhere between 1/3 distance in the race, but well under halfway, because remember that the first set of tyres has to work a lot harder than the second, because the car is 50% heavier when it's full of fuel, and that makes a lot more strain on the tyres, a lot more heat build-up. As a result of which you would want to change to get the right balance between the two sets somewhere soon after 1/3 distance, and this we have already passed by quite a long way.
A lot of people around the world will probably be saying to themselves now that the last race of the year in Australia is going to be a dull one now that the World Championship has been decided. Let me very rapidly disabuse them of that thought if they've had it, because it means to say now that at Adelaide, Mansell, Senna, Berger and Prost will all be on level terms. The championship has been decided, whereas although Prost and Senna would have been trying tremendously hard in Adelaide, they would have been backed up by Mansell and Berger respectively, who would have had to defer to the championship contenders. In Adelaide that will certainly not be the case. Berger, Senna, Prost and Mansell will be on equal terms, with nothing to gain or lose in championship terms. And Berger has yet, I say again, I seem to have been saying it at so many Grand Prix this year, to win a Grand Prix for McLaren. He won for Benetton when he drove for them. He won for Ferrari, of course. And that, incidentally, is Bernard in the pits. Eric Bernard now accelerating out of them. And the three top men, Mansell, Prost and Senna, have all won Grand Prix this year. Senna's won 6, Prost has won 5, Mansell has won 1, and Berger has not won any. So Berger, who must already be under some psychological stress because of the number of accidents that he's had this year, will be trying very hard indeed at Adelaide.
And we have a new fastest lap for Derek Warwick, and that is, of course, what one would expect to a certain extent, because he's just put new tyres on. And that gives you quite a lot of extra speed for the first couple of 2 or 3 laps. And Warwick has just changed in his first flying lap on the new set as fastest lap of the race so far. Now back with Mansell. Now you look at the buffeting his hands are getting from the steering wheel, the way his head's being shaken about. And Mansell's 8 seconds now ahead of Nelson Piquet, and beginning to be commanding the race from the front. I think he'd like a bit of a bigger lead than this, particularly if he's cogitating a pit stop, which if he plans to make one, he ought to be making it very soon indeed. But I think he's going to try and go the distance. Johnny Herbert in the other Lotus is coming into the pits as we speak. There he is. And we couldn't see how long that one had taken, but it looked reasonably organised, so let's hope it was a good stop for Johnny Herbert's sake, because he really both needs and deserves a good result. He's had a pretty torrid time with his injuries over the last 2 years. It's over 2 years ago now since that horrendous accident at Brands Hatch, big multiple shunt. So Nakajima
in 7th place, being chased by Thierry Boutsen, who of course has been into the pits. Nakajima has not. He's on Pirelli tyres, and Boutsen is on a new set of Goodyears as Nigel Mansell goes through to complete another lap, and in this case it is his 25th, so he's virtually up to half distance. That 26 and a half is the exact half distance in this 53 lap race. But Nigel Mansell isn't quite there, and he's still on his original set of Goodyear C tyres, the softer compound, although the tyre company itself says there's not all that much difference in wear. As into the pits now comes Aguri Suzuki, and he, at the time he came in, was in 5th position. That means to say that Derek Warwick now moves up into 5th place. No, Derek Warwick, of course, has been into the pits. So, yes, that is the situation. And Warwick now is in 9th position, and that means Johnny Herbert is in 5th position. An incredible achievement. There is Nakajima, so he's given up the battle with Thierry Boutsen. And it's all confusion at the present moment because of the tyre stops. But on lap 26, coming up to half distance, it is Mansell, Piquet, Moreno, Patrese, the first 4.
Yes, well, I think it's the teams that we have seen come in for tyres are by and large, I would think, late. The Ferrari pit crew we can see getting ready with their tyres, possibly for Mansell. Whether they have made the decision or whether they're just preparing themselves, I don't know, because if they had planned a stop or knew they were going to make one, we see yellow flags in the background, somebody's off, and Mansell does come in. So Mansell, late, slightly late to get the best out of both sets of tyres, but I'm sure maybe the reason, though, for that, in that he wanted to just keep building his lead before relinquishing it, in the hope that he might get a new set of tyres on and get out, if not in the lead, very close to it indeed. So Mansell now. There is running the clock, but we've got a caption, and Moreno, Pico have gone, and under 6 seconds by Ferrari. Oh, Mansell's got a problem with the gearbox, maybe. He booted away in first, and looks like he's done the transmission, and problems for Nigel Mansell, and well, that really says it all. Poor Mansell. So I would think somewhere in the drivetrain there was a breakage as he booted it away on fresh rubber, and that really is a great shame for Nigel Mansell.
And that was Cesare Fiorio. Well, what an absolute disaster. And all my prophecies about Ferrari closing up in the Constructors' Championship were for nothing. Nigel Mansell out again. And you saw his gesture of despair and fury, because that is the 9th time in 15 races that Mansell is sitting in the cockpit absolutely overcome with despair. And now, for the 2nd year in succession, Benetton lead in Japan as, well, you can see from the body language how disgusted and despairing Mansell is, and you can see from the position of Cesare Fiorio's mouth He is the much criticised Ferrari team manager, and Mansell is, well, no words can sum up his feelings.
Yes, Fiorio, known in the trade as the welder. As you see by his attire, that's why the mechanics call him the welder.
So, Benetton lead with their Ford engines, and they've yet to win a Grand Prix this year. It would be poetic justice if Nelson Piquet won here today. He was talking on the start line, sitting in the cockpit of that car, to Alessandro Nannini in Italy. One of the wonders of modern communication and television, that Nannini in hospital was able to talk to his ex-teammate. Now here's a replay. Now we're with Mansell in the pits. Let's watch what happened. He accelerates hard out of way down the pit lane, and immediately the power goes.
Yes, you can see his right hand fumbling for gears there. Remember, the gear levers are little flick switches on the back of the steering wheel, and there is Mansell walking back, very dejected. But the only thing I can say to you, Nigel, in compensation, better to happen this year, the breakdowns, than next, because next year Mansell and a new fastest lap for Suzuki, and we can see with these fastest laps that the new tyres do give a big increase in speed. But Mansell, with Williams next year, he's looking to win the World Championship, so if he's got some breakdowns in his system or his personal quota of luck, I'm sure he'd rather do it today and again even at Adelaide than here. And there's a breakdown. I can't see from the light who that is. And I think it's one of the Lolas, and we think it's Eric Bernard.
So, yes, he dives. Oh, my goodness, he left it at the very last moment to dart across into the pit lane. But now, in Japan, on lap 28, all the four top men of the World Championship of 1990 are out. Senna and Prost at the first corner. Berger on lap 2, Nigel Mansell on lap 27, and that means to say that with most of the tyre stops completed, as you look at Aguri Suzuki on lap 28 out of 53, it is Nelson Piquet, Benetton Ford leading. Amazingly, his new teammate Roberto Moreno, who incidentally has been confirmed for a drive for Benetton at the last Grand Prix of the year, the 500th World Championship race since the series began in 1950. Roberto Moreno is second. In third position it is Riccardo Patrese, who has yet to stop for tyres. In fourth place, and now making the fastest lap of the race and the quickest man on the circuit, is Aguri Suzuki. Fifth is Thierry Boutsen, who has moved ahead of Derek Warwick on the tyre stop into sixth place, and you can see that Suzuki is really flying. So then behind Warwick in seventh place it is Nakajima, eighth is Johnny Herbert, in ninth position it is Nicola Larini, in 10th position appropriately number 10 Alex Caffey, and in 11th place it is Pierluigi Martini. Well, the race in terms of real excitement at the front has not been all that exciting after the first lap. But now, with Mansell out and with Piquet leading, and incidentally, Piquet's last win was at Monza in 1987 when he was world champion driving for Williams Honda, the things are really picking up.
Quite a mature piece of thinking on the part of Suzuki that he decided to stay with something he is established in and he believes in. And that, more importantly, the team believe in him.
Yeah, absolutely right. I think Brabham Yamaha were trying to get him to sign for them. Of course, a lot of his success in Formula 3000 was with Yamaha engines. Well, Piquet leads. This is lap number 30. And Roberto Moreno now 3.8 seconds behind in third.
But the man to watch at the moment is Suzuki, because we just had a very good shot of him through the quick sweeps, and he's really attacking this circuit. Of course, he's got every motivation in a Japanese-owned car, and particularly on the opposition's owned circuit, namely Honda owned this circuit. Suzuki has a chance to make a name for himself, and he's certainly trying. He was really throwing the car around just now. We had a good view of him through the S's, and there you see again, yes, he's really very attacking driving, tremendous stuff.
And this is one of the Arrows cars. It's Alex Caffey, actually, and he is in 12th position, and he is chasing his teammate Michele Alboreto in 11th place ahead of him. We're now on lap 30, and this, of course, is the, I don't mean this unkindly, but in comparative terms, the fairly lumbering Arrows, because the car's chief attribute these days is the fact that it's extremely reliable. For most of this season, Arrows, and he's about to be lapped by race leader Nelson Piquet. Most of this season, Arrows have been concentrating on the development of next year's car with the Porsche V12 engine.
Well, it certainly looks as if the Benetton team are intending to go through the race without a pit stop. Remember that they are on the harder compound of tyre, the slightly harder compound. It's not a big difference, and it may just be that they could have a struggle towards the end of the race. Somehow I doubt it. I think the tyre will hold up all right, but they do face that possibility. And there is Nelson Piquet, current race leader, being tracked by his teammate. And you just got a subliminal glimpse there of Moreno's Benetton behind. Now the rearward facing camera. Very good view, and under braking there, of course, you see the Benetton closing right up. And yellow flags being waved there. Yes, and a car under the bridge. Can't see who it is, but somebody under the bridge is off. And now the gap. Moreno has dropped back over 4 seconds now, and this may well be Moreno's fitness struggling to stay. This is about, well, this is certainly the time of the race where it's hurting a lot for everybody, but these drivers are used to that. But it's when you physically no longer have the strength left to muscle them, and this is the sort of stage of the race where, on this very hard circuit indeed, Moreno, I should think, is beginning to lack for muscle.
Nelson Piquet leading the Japanese Grand Prix, but he's leading it at a much earlier stage, of course, than his teammate. Well, there is number 9, that's Michele Alboreto's Arrows out. Yes, I'm afraid the super reliable Arrows, which I was talking about, has once more had the Murray Walker prophecy proved wrong. So, but never mind, Alex Caffey is still going. That's a 50% record. And I was saying the last Grand Prix, there's Moreno in second place. The last Grand Prix that Benetton won was, of course, Japan last year. And before that, their first and only victory was when Gerhard Berger won in Mexico in 1986. So there's been a bit of a drought. And next year, Benetton will have the new John Barnard designed car. When I tell you, you're looking back now from Alex Caffey's Arrows at race leader Nelson Piquet, who is definitely taking his time about closing and getting past Caffey, because Piquet knows exactly what the situation is. Like all the top drivers, he has got a car to pits radio, which is telling him where he is, how far ahead of Moreno he is. He knows that Roberto Moreno is there to protect him from anybody who may be attacking. And of course, Riccardo Patrese in third position behind Roberto Moreno is not in an attacking situation at the moment, because of the distance that he is behind the Benetton. With in fourth place Akiri Suzuki, the fastest man on the circuit, as again you look back at race leader Piquet. In fifth position is Thierry Boutsen, so the two Williams are third and fifth. In sixth position, and everybody will hope that he stays there, Derek Warwick, as jaws like the shark Benetton closes up on the Arrows of Alex Caffey. I have sometimes questioned the wisdom of a rear-facing camera, but not today.
No, exactly. Now you see Piquet closing up in the slipstream a little bit, and he's gone through finally. So Piquet has made it through, and he's certainly waiting for that moment. He would have lost quite a few seconds to his overall speed there, following in the turbulence from the Arrows for a lap and a half, something like that. Yes, and there you are. You see he's lost on the gap to Moreno, who's running on his own. He's lost 6 or 7 tenths of a second in that one lap.
There are only 12 cars running now out of the 26 who started. A lot of disappeared by the wayside. And here is the race order on lap 33. Nelson Piquet leading Roberto Moreno, his teammate, by a comfortable 3.5 seconds. That's the oil flag, red and yellow. That means that there's a problem ahead. And there is the problem. It's Johnny Herbert. Well, sadly, he's not going to finish this race, but he has proved that he's capable of driving a Grand Prix car very quickly indeed, because sadly, the Lotus was not the best car in the race, but yet Johnny Herbert had got it up to 5th place.
Yes, and I have to say, I'm very pleased with that for Johnny Herbert. I think it's, in a funny way, the breakdown when it came, he certainly acquitted himself extremely well. He's shown that his strength is back and that he was driving well, because Derek Warwick is driving as well as at any time in his career, and Herbert was running with him. And also, too hard a race here, I would have thought, if he'd gone the whole distance, would not be good for his still rehabilitating body. Conversely, he's done just enough today that really that should help his fitness for when he gets down to Adelaide. And with one race under his belt already in the Lotus, I'm sure he'll be even more competitive in Adelaide, fitter, and this will have done his confidence also a great deal of good. So the gap now for between the two Benettons, very nearly 4 seconds. As Suzuki goes through, surrounded by Olivier.
Of Nicola Larini, and I cannot say how pleased I am personally for that man, Roberto Moreno, who is without doubt one of the very nicest men in Grand Prix racing. And we first got to know in Britain when he came over from Brazil, the diminutive little man who couldn't speak a word of English, in 1980, and won the Formula Ford Championship in Britain. He went on and won the Formula Ford Festival, the most prestigious thing you can do in that class of racing. And then he was the Formula 3 New Zealand and Pacific champion. He actually won the Australian Grand Prix twice, when it was the Formula Atlantic Formula, and in doing so he beat people like Alan Jones and Jacques Lafitte. He's driven in Indy racing. He was the Formula 3000 European champion of 1988. But then when he came into Grand Prix racing, it was with Coloni and Eurobrunn, having had a test with Lotus, and he tried to qualify for the Dutch Grand Prix round about 1984, if my memory serves me right. And then he just took a step backwards, but it wasn't because he was without talent, quite the reverse. And so now we're looking back from Caffey's car, having seen Nelson Piquet in the Benetton pass the arrows, at Roberto Moreno from Brazil, 31 years old. This is his hour and a half of glory, second in Japan, in a situation where this year the only previous finish he has had was at Phoenix in 13th place, and 10 times Roberto Moreno this year has failed to qualify in the Eurobrunn. Incidentally, there was no life car here in pre-qualifying. Bruno Giacomelli and the life team rightly decided not to come to Japan, having failed to pre-qualify for every Grand Prix, and Moreno is here because there are no Eurobrunns either.
Yes, we have a good view of Moreno's efforts to pass. Oh, we were having a good view, but I think he'll have to wait for the start-finish straight to get a tow, as we saw Piquet do just a couple of laps earlier. There's Nakajima now.
Warwick in 6th spot, then Nakajima, and in 8th place Larini.
So, as you look at Satoru Nakajima chasing Derek Warwick, who is in 6th position, so Nakajima is 7th, and now you look back at Roberto Moreno, 2nd in the race. Here are the retirements thus far. Roberto Moreno goes through, over the grid to start another lap.
To get
With Nakajima still chasing Warwick and retired so far as we ride with Alex Cathy now, looking forward from his arrows. And retirements are Ayrton Senna, Alain Prost, first corner. Gerhard Berger, second lap. Maurizio Gugelmin out on lap 6. David Brabham, the Australian driver in the Brabham, whose place in the team is very much at risk for 1991, retires. Stefano Modena has gone out, so has De Cesaris, Morbidelli, Nigel Mansell, of course, Eric Bernard, Michele Alboreto, and now, and Johnny Herbert, I forgot to mention him. And Warwick is passed by Nakajima, so is the Lotus in trouble? I can't believe that Derek Warwick would have allowed that to happen if the car was really fit, because Warwick is still desperately hoping.
Yes, well, maybe he made a mistake coming out of the chicane before the start-finish straight, because he ought to have more power for acceleration than Nakajima, and it was that Nakajima got past him on that start-finish straight, which is uphill a bit. And here we see it again. Now you see Warwick defended the corner, so he's not in that much trouble because he took the inside line, but Nakajima stayed off the brakes just that little bit longer and got round the outside of him. But I must say that I would have thought that Warwick was slow away. Now let's hope that was only a missed gear and nothing more serious mechanically, such as trouble in the gearbox. He's actually lost a gear or two. That of course would seriously hurt his acceleration if he's lost one of the mid-range gears. Now into the pits comes Riccardo Patrese for, well, it's awfully late for a routine tyre stop. Are they doing anything else to the car? No, they don't appear to be. Yeah, and a bit slow off the line then by Patrese.
Well now, the Japanese have never had it so good. The flags of the rising sun are waving all round the circuit. I can see the headbands coming out shortly and the cries of Banzai, because up into third position goes Aguri Suzuki with Satoru Nakajima in 5th place, and the race is getting really exciting from the Japanese point of view. There is the confirmation. Piquet leads, Moreno second, Suzuki third. Patrese has gone into the pits, of course, and that means to say that Boutsen is now up into 4th place with Nakajima 5th. Japanese drivers, for the first time in the history of World Championship Grand Prix racing, I've got 2 men in the first 5 places.
Yes, indeed, and will they not be excited about that? Well, that will probably mean that they'll be out with a shot. The Japanese in general will be out with more Grand Prix teams on their shopping list. They seem to be actively buying up everything that's available in terms of Grand Prix teams, those that are struggling financially and that sort of thing, and coming in to turn them round. And that certainly, this result, if that's what it becomes, will certainly cause even more interest and even greater enthusiasm in Japan, and that can be no bad thing.
Well, the mice are getting at the machinery now in the biggest possible way, because Capelli is out, and so now with Aguri Suzuki barely throwing the Larousse Lola Lamborghini round the circuit, and incidentally Lola have lost their Lamborghini engines for 1991 and are now going to be using Brian Hart Ford DFR engines, and I can hear the cries and the shouts and the roar of the Japanese crowd above the engines as you look at Riccardo Patrese, who has been in for tyres, and Thierry Boutsen on lap 38. And the race order is Nelson Piquet commandingly leading, not having made a pit stop on the hard Goodyear B compound. The same applies to his teammate Roberto Moreno, driving brilliantly and tactically in his first real Grand Prix in 2nd place. In 3rd position it is Aguri Suzuki, and in 4th place now Riccardo Patrese, having made his tyre stop, and the battle behind him is with Thierry Boutsen, who is in 5th place, Nakajima in 6th position. Derek Warwick in the sole Lotus now, with Johnny Herbert having retired, is in 7th place. 8th is Nicola Larini in 9th position. It is Pierluigi Martini. 10th is Alex Caffey, and in 11th position it is Philippe Alliot, running strong. And we reckon, we did a count, and we reckon that Philippe Alliot, who is currently in 11th position in the 15th Grand Prix of 1990, has actually had 14 crashes this year, most of which we've seen on television. Alliot's contract has not been renewed by Guy Ligier for 1991. Nelson Piquet then.
Yes, Murray, you say that as if that would be the reason for firing him, but it would be a very strange reason for firing him, because they knew he did that before they hired him, because he's always done that, as Alliot. He's an absolute guaranteed regular crasher. So I don't suppose Ligier fired him for that, or if they did, they must be feeling pretty stupid, because if that's why they're firing him, they should never have hired him in the first place.
Never mind, they've got Thierry Boutsen next year, and you watch now race leader Nelson Piquet is coming up to Pierluigi Martini, the only Minardi driver in the race, because Gianni Morbidelli, who is yet to finish a Grand Prix, he actually tried in Phoenix and Brazil in the Dallara team to finish a race, but certainly didn't. And next year the Minardi team are going to have Ferrari engines.
You see here Nelson Piquet being very circumspect with the Minardi, waiting hopefully for this point on the circuit where he can get him under acceleration, because with all his experience he knows the risks of passing back markers, and he also knows that he's got a very comfortable lead. He's got a teammate behind him who will defend his rear, and he's safely through. Plenty of time to sit behind slower traffic if he doesn't feel entirely confident and comfortable that he can get through with a guaranteed clean.
Nelson Piquet, of course, has taken an awful lot of stick in the last 3 years, because having been world champion in 1987 for Williams, he drove for Lotus in 1988 and 89 in a car which really wasn't a race winner, no matter who was driving it. Nelson Piquet certainly didn't win any races. The highest he ever finished for Lotus was 4th place. And a lot of people said Piquet is over the hill. But then a lot of other people reminded us that Nelson Piquet is a man who really needs the right car, and that's Warwick! Derek Warwick! Oh my goodness, so once again the unfortunate Derek Warwick fails to finish, and that is the 8th time this year he's out.
He will just pull off the side of the track. He's pulled off on the left-hand side. He got across to the left-hand side and walking back to the pits. Yeah, I don't know if that was transmission. That car actually has a Lamborghini-built gearbox as well as the engine. It has, and in fact the gearbox has been a very reliable part of the car by and large throughout the season. Well, there's Roberto Moreno. He's only ever had...
Well, I'll just quickly finish my thought, and that is that Nelson Piquet is certainly vindicating himself here, because he's demonstrating that given the right car he can still win races. All right, Berger's out, Mansell's out, Prost's out, Senna's out, but Nelson Piquet is in, and it's the combination of car and driver that wins races, and it looks as though at the present moment number 20 Nelson Piquet is on his way to his 21st win in his 187th Grand Prix. And this is the man who's scored the second highest number of World Championship points of all time, 441 thus far, in comparison with the amazing Alain Prost's 661.5. Why 0.5? Because Prost won the Monaco Grand Prix in a situation where he didn't go the full distance, and you therefore get half points. And Suzuki is still the fastest man on the circuit, closing up on Roberto Moreno in second place, except now it's Riccardo Patrese, who of course is benefiting from those new tyres that he has recently taken on. This is lap 41. The Japanese Grand Prix is a 53-lap race, and the race order is Piquet leading, Moreno second, Suzuki third, and the Japanese driver has yet to finish a race on the podium, which means one of the top 3 finishing places, and the same certainly applies to the Larousse-Lola team. In 4th position now, it is Riccardo Patrese. 5th is his teammate Boutsen. 6th is Nakajima. So it's Japanese drivers, the both of them in the top 6 places. Within 7th place, Nicola Larini, and the highest that Larini has finished this year, he's 7th at the moment, was 7th in Spain. And I wonder if there isn't a retirement or two yet to come, so Ligier may yet score a point this year.
As well as we've just seen from the caption, Suzuki is 19 seconds behind Moreno, but I do get the impression that Moreno is starting to tire, and that would be only natural. Doesn't matter how hard you train for this or any other sport, you can only get to a certain level of fitness, of good general fitness, by pure training. To get match fit for any sport, you have to physically do that as well as all your training first. Now, Moreno's done plenty of training, no doubt, but he's done very little driving this year, because driving for Eurobrunn, he's had Friday morning pre-qualifying, and that's about it, because there's a team that can't afford. And look at that! 13.085 seconds the gap, 6 seconds in very little time indeed has Suzuki taken off his the deficit to 2nd place. So can Roberto Moreno respond? I'm sure he's tired now, but the threat of somebody closing on you can give you that little bit of an extra adrenaline push that may just get a little bit more out of those incredibly tired and aching muscles. So Suzuki chasing hard.
And while you watch Suzuki in 3rd place gaining on Moreno, here is a thought for today. If Nelson Piquet wins this race, he will win nearly £450,000. Because he is on a bonus of $100,000 per World Championship point. That is £50,000, if my exchange rate memories are right. $900,000 for a win, about £450,000. Not bad for less than 1.5 hours work. But of course, it has got almost a lifetime's of experience behind him. And Suzuki is still flying. We are on lap 43, with only 10 of the 26 drivers left who started this Japanese Grand Prix, and Suzuki is really going for it.
Yes, Seema, there is Gérard Larousse, the team manager, in the pits, and they must be very excited. Now the gap, well, traffic may be moving the gaps around, because now he's lost a bit of time to Moreno, but he's certainly flying, and I'm glad to see this, because Suzuki, from the day he arrived in Europe, which was a couple of years ago, 3 years ago, I think, in a Formula 3000 race, in rather an agricultural-looking car, he impressed me enormously, particularly that very first time, as a driver with talent and ability. And now he's really showing it. He's driven very well this year, because he and Eric Bernard, who's also a very talented young driver, have battled it out for supremacy within the Larousse team, and in fact they've pretty much boxed a draw so far, but today on his home ground, a circuit that he knows like the back of his hand and all his early racing career here, no doubt, Suzuki is really having the best race of his career by a long way.
Piquet leads, Moreno 2nd, and 2 Chargers 3rd and 4th. You've seen and heard about Aguri Suzuki, but of course Riccardo Patrese in 4th place is very much on his way on new tyres, ahead of Thierry Boutsen 5th, Satoru Nakajima 6th, Nicola Larini 7th, Pierluigi Martini 8th, Alex Caffey is 9th, in 10th position is Billy Ballio, and that is the lot. Well, Piquet won't be thinking of the money, but he will be thinking of victory, and he will be thinking that above all he's got to drive a sensible, relaxed race, and with all his experience he will be doing that, and he will be certainly savouring the thought of mounting that top step of the podium for the first time since Monza in 1987, and this will mean, if he finishes in first place here in Japan, he has won races for Brabham and a whole lot of them. He has won races for Williams and a whole lot of them. He's been world champion for Brabham and for Williams. He's not going to be world champion for Benetton this year, but he is potentially going to have a win for the third constructor he has driven for out of 4, in a situation there was no way that he was going to win last year and the year before in the Lotus. That is Roberto Moreno. And what an incredible Grand Prix story this is. Moreno, from 10 failures to pre-qualify this year, 2 failures to qualify, only 1 finish in Phoenix and a failure to finish at San Marino, for which he qualified in the Eurobrunn, looks like finishing second in his first real Grand Prix drive. Brilliant.
Yes, and Moreno in second place now seems to be quite capable of holding Suzuki, holding that gap, or holding it enough to maintain his second place. And there, of course, we got the speedometer on the right with the percentage of foot on the throttle. Oh, they've even got the throttle pedal for us on the capture. Isn't that fun? I'm mesmerised by the throttle pedal going up and down. And despite his stirring efforts there, Suzuki chasing hard, and we had some terrific shots of him throwing the car around. He's not really making any impression on Moreno, especially with under 10 laps to go. Unless Moreno can make some sort of a mistake or has a bit of mechanical trouble, I think really the first 3 are pretty much settled.
Well, if this race goes to the end as it is going now, it is going to be a super result for Grand Prix racing.
Yeah, we're still following Nagori Suzuki. Well, Moreno's picked up the pace. He's now running at the same speed as race leader Nelson Piquet. Of course, that's the pace that Suzuki's been running at for quite a long time, so the gap now is really around 15 seconds. Moreno has stemmed that charge Suzuki had been making on in second place, so certainly Moreno doing a truly outstanding job. And as has in fact Nagori Suzuki. 8 laps to go. Nelson Piquet had fairly well back in his traditional driving style. Tough old competitor Nelson Piquet has been around since 1979 regularly, and he did a few Grand Prix at the end of 78. So a lot of racing miles for Nelson Piquet, not as many as Ricardo Patrese though. Benetton, of course, only previously won 2 races, the 86 Mexican Grand Prix, and of course this race last year.
Talking about those Japanese drivers back in 76, Hoshino, I believe, is the same Hoshino that just won the Formula 3000 Championship this year in Japan. And Japan is a country, in fact, where racing drivers are not encumbered with age. It's something Formula 1 does suffer from. If you're more than 35 or 6, or just your late 30s, then you're considered to be well past it over the hill. But in Japan, they respect drivers of experience and age, and it just goes to prove in Japan and in America, people like Mario Andretti are still capable of doing the bizzo.
As you are, of course, with Toyota. Just remind everyone, John Watson is 44. Well, Piquet in the lead from Moreno and Suzuki. Patrese is in 4th spot, Boutsen, Nakajima, Larini. Good drive that up to 7th place. Martini, Cappy and Alio.
Although we haven't seen them, of course, they didn't have a race with the real leading contenders because they all fell by the wayside, to both Ferraris and McLarens, and so we didn't get a chance to measure the performance against that, but certainly Moreno has reduced the gap to Piquet a little bit, but I think Piquet has now eased up on his lead rather than anything startling. But of course, remember, Moreno has been busy responding to the charge from Suzuki. I think one could say he's now dealt with it and he could relax up again, but of course he has nothing like the experience of Nelson Piquet. And he took a second out of him in the last lap, but Piquet knows that it's his teammate behind him and he's quite comfortable. Now this is an important moment for Suzuki in the LaRousse,
who comes up to pass Alex Caffey, the sole Arrows driver. And Suzuki will, they locked up his tyres there, you saw the smoke, but he's dived through on the inside with the knowledge that he's in third position. He'll know it, of course, from his radio. You can see the little aerial to the front of the cockpit, just slightly to the right of Suzuki as he sits in the car. And that's the confirmation. Piquet leads by 5.5 seconds from Roberto Moreno, with Aguri Suzuki, the man we're looking at the moment, in third position in the Lola Lamborghini. Then fourth and fifth, the two Williams Renaults, and one must honestly say that it's a disappointment for them that they are only fourth and fifth, with the Patrick Head designed chassis and that Renault V10 engine to propel it. Ricardo Patrese is fourth, and Thierry Boutsen is in fifth place. And by the way, this is Ricardo Patrese's 207th Grand Prix, the most experienced Grand Prix driver of all time. The second Japanese driver, and that is Suzuki you're looking at, Satoru Nakajima in the Tyrrell Ford, is in sixth place. Seventh is Larini, eighth is Martini, ninth is Alex Caffey, 10th is Philippe Alliot, and there are 16 retirements. Senna, Prost, Berger, Gugelmin, Brabham, Modena, De Cesaris, Morbidelli, Mansell, Bernard, Capelli, Alboreto, Herbert, Warwick. And there is Nelson Piquet. Well, fingers crossed for Nelson Piquet and Roberto Moreno, and for all of them for that matter, because the ones who have got to this stage of the race, lap 48 out of 53, richly deserve the finishing positions that they will be striving for. There is no real contest on the circuit now for positions. I'm quite sure that Piquet will be watching all his cockpit indicators very carefully, listening to his instructions, not his instructions, his information from the pit as he goes into that notorious chicane which claimed Senna and Prost last year and caused so much contention. Now Piquet is out of the chicane, down the start and finish straight with, as you see, 5 laps to go. He's doing about 180 miles an hour as he goes into turns 1 and 2, the two 90-degree turns that join up. He exits them at about 80 miles an hour. He goes into the S-curve at 120 miles an hour. Then into turn 7, where he is now, 100 miles an hour. Up into fourth gear, up to the Degner curve, the right-hander. Then he's approaching the crossover point, and you'll see it in just a few moments as he goes up towards the hairpin curve. And that is very much the tight left-hander. There's the crossover point, you just saw him. Now he comes into hairpin curve. That's first gear, 60 miles an hour, out of it into second. Listen to the engine note. Third, fourth. Roberto Moreno in the Benetton, in second place, well ahead now of Aguri Suzuki in the Lola Lamborghini, lap 49. Well, Japan has had a feast of potential success in its own Grand Prix. I say potential because the race is still some way from being over. Lap 49, 53-lap race. And although if there are any bugs in the machinery, they should have been sorted out by now, it's not inconceivable that somebody is still going to retire. We've seen Grand Prix lost at the last corner. I remember the great Jack Brabham at Monaco at the very last bend, running out of petrol and letting Jochen Rindt through in the Lotus to win with only about 200 yards of the race left. So there's the chicane. Here is Riccardo Patrese, 4th position. The man who's going to be number 2 to Nigel Mansell in the Williams Renault next year.
Now, you're more of a historian than I am, Murray, but I thought that in 1970, when that happened, that Brabham went off on the last corner to let the win for Jochen Rindt with that magnificent drive was not because of lack of petrol. I think there was a back marker in the way and lack of road. He ran out of road, surely, under pressure from Rindt, with the back marker to confuse the issue, which was a most un-Brabham-like error, but it was a most spectacular Rindt drive, probably the greatest drive of the late, great Jochen Rindt's all-too-short career.
You're absolutely right, James, but that was only your starter for 10 more to come. And Nelson Piquet still leads the Japanese Grand Prix.
And I'm retiring from quizzes right now.
So Nelson Piquet leads, Roberto Moreno second. If it stays as it is, brilliant race for the Benetton team and for Ford, who, after all, have stuck their neck out again to sponsor a Grand Prix engine, having put the money under the leadership of Walter Hayes years ago into producing, with the Keith Duckworth design, that great Ford V8 DFV engine which won 155 Grand Prix. Then Mike Cranafus, the Ford Sport Supremo now, motivates the main Ford board to spend money on a new Grand Prix engine, and it is really coming good. Last year, Benetton won in Japan, a contested victory. Alessandro Nannini, who will be watching this television now from Italy, recovering from his dreadful helicopter accident, and this will be a big fillip to the Italian to see his teammate, this man, Nelson Piquet, almost home to his first Grand Prix victory since the Italian in 1987. And if Roberto Moreno stays where he is, that was the crossover point that I was telling you about. In this unique circuit, if Roberto Moreno stays where he is, it will be the first ever first and second positioning for the Benetton team in a Grand Prix, and that is Roberto Moreno. And you can see that he's certainly closing up on Nelson Piquet now. Piquet pacing himself to the finish. Just 2 laps to go after this one, because it's lap 51 now. Each lap here in Japan is 3.6 miles, so there's only 8 or 9 miles to go.
Yes, and as we look at Roberto Moreno, I would like to think that his drive today will certainly have done him a lot of good towards securing that same seat for next season in the absence of Sandro Nannini. And that would be very well deserved, because Moreno, he of course now has the easy signal out. Because really it's not worth chasing now, and I think that was on the Larousse board for Suzuki, so they're telling him he's not that experienced, don't bother to try and chase, you're not going to catch him. But let's hope that this very, very solid drive by Roberto Moreno, his talent we all knew about, but a nice solid drive should do an enormous amount of good for him towards getting selected for that seat next year. Remember, of course, though, he's got Australia to come, and I'm sure he'll be judged on that. I'm quite sure that the Benetton team have no need to panic into signing up another driver as yet, because anybody who is not signed as yet as a driver is not going to sign for anybody else while that plum drive is available, and therefore they can afford certainly to wait till after the Australian Grand Prix before they commit themselves to a replacement driver for Nannini. And I'm sure Moreno is one of the best on the market. He's extremely talented, quick, he's never had the right brake, and it looks like this is his brake, and he's taken the first offering of it extremely well indeed. Looking at Suzuki, still Japanese driver, 3rd place, tremendous showing from Japanese on home territory. And A lot of celebrating about that. Nelson Piquet also riding to easy orders, I've no doubt, because it's only Moreno behind him. You can hear he's not revving the engine at all right up to the revs then. He was shifting up through the gearbox very quickly. So, Nelson Piquet starts his final lap of the Japanese Grand Prix, and certainly today Nelson has delivered the goods, and he has proved that he knows what to do, and he can win a race when it's handed to him on a plate. It's not his fault that it was handed to him on the plate, this Grand Prix, but the top 4 cars all went out, or top 3 went out early on. That was the 2 McLarens and Berger's, and Prost's Ferrari, and then Mansell was going away from the Benettons quite comfortably in his Ferrari when he went to the pits for tyres and then never got going again. So what Piquet, unfortunately for his point of view, which is important I'm sure, has not been able to prove today, is he's proved that he can take an inherited win when handed to him. He hasn't proved he can go out and win a race and beat everybody else, and that's really what we want to see from Piquet.
Well, if Piquet wins and he's almost home, the 9 points that he gets will move him up to 4th in the World Championship, with just the last race of the series of 1990 to go, Australia in 2 weeks' time. So, first place in the race, 4th place in the World Championship, and £450,000 for his day's work is a very good reward indeed. And Nelson Piquet now is almost home. He's just got the last few corners to go. He goes into the chicane, into the last corner now. He can almost see the checkered flag, because there is Piquet winning the Japanese Grand Prix. His first victory since 1987. A win for Benetton, as it was last year in Japan. A brilliant second place for Roberto Moreno in his first real Grand Prix. A superb third position for Aguri Suzuki. Here he is, coming up to the line now, to the joy and the acclamation of the enormous Japanese crowd. In 4th position, Riccardo Patrese. In 5th place, Thierry Boutsen. In 6th place, the second Japanese driver, Satoru Nakajima. And that means to say now that Senna has won the World Championship of 1990. Prost will be second, but Berger, who is third, could still be beaten by Nelson Piquet, who has moved up to 4th. Thierry Boutsen is 5th in the World Championship at the moment. Nigel Mansell in 6th place. And the Constructors' Championship goes to Australia, with McLaren leading Ferrari by 18 points.
Well, all finishing in the gravel. The very first corner of the very first lap. Well, we didn't want that to happen. Look at the result there. Piquet, Moreno, Suzuki, Patrese, Boutsen and Nakajima. 2 Japanese drivers in the top 6. The first time that that's ever happened in the 40-year history of Grand Prix racing. Of course, the next race in Australia will be the 500th Grand Prix. And Australia's certainly getting excited about that. Well, they're the 2 Benetton Fords in formation, and congratulations too to Rory Byrne, who designed that car, who's now with Tolman, of course. Left the team after the Spanish Grand Prix. Well, it's been a while since he's had that winning feeling, Nelson Piquet.
Of course, the winning feeling will be improved because Piquet's basic contract this year had a performance clause in it, and nothing like winning a race to increase the performance clause.
There are the points. Senna 78, Prost 69, Berger 40, Piquet 35, Boutsen 32 and Nigel Mansell on 31 after that disappointing end to his race when he was actually leading.
Minuto 12 segundos e 3 décimos. Sétimo Larini a uma volta, 8º Martini também a uma volta, ainda a uma volta, Cassi em 9º e Alliot em 10º. Melhor volta para Ricardo Patrese na 40ª, 1 minuto 44 segundos, 233 milésimos. Este tempo não é recorde, mantém-se o recorde de Alain Prost desde batido em 1989. No campeonato, este resultado acaba por ter reflexos
bonus for Nelson Piquet.
Yeah, well, $900,000 is not a bad day's work. That's over and above his prize money, of course. It's a good result, but I still think that the Ford engines have been a little bit disappointing as far as I'm concerned, because this is the only victory that they've had since this time last year, and that was by virtually default as well, because, I mean, at the end of the day, we had the Ferraris and the McLarens go out. They have won. It's a good result. It's a fabulous drive by Marino. But I have been a little bit disappointed in the progress of this new Ford engine, because, I mean, after all, they are the second largest motor manufacturer in the world, and, you know, it's not to say they pushed for a quid or anything. But nevertheless, a good result. They got first and second, but I just reiterate, I think it was by default. An excellent drive by Marino, and, of course, Suzuki, well, I mean, you know, he'll be beside himself, as indeed will all the J models that we're looking at the moment. But a good result for them, because they are fanatic. I mean, they're just fast approaching the Italians with there's Marino now, obviously very happy. Oh, yeah, it's just not many, yeah.
Well, I mean, you raced against that little man here in Australia, as James Hunter-Murray talked about. I don't think you finished in that race.
No, I didn't. I retired, and
I just thought I'd make you feel better.
Thanks, Daz, yeah. But no, he's actually been around the circuits for many, many years, and he's always been the guy that's just missed out on the good drive. And it's great to see him now as Nakajima is actually coming in. That was an excellent result for him. Of course, the Japanese do always go extremely well on their home circuits. There's a lot of good sports car drivers that put them on Fuji and Suzuka, and you know, they go like rockets. But just take them out of that environment, and they seem to get lost.
I must confess, I was at the track last year for that race, and the support there, the numbers of people are just astounding. I mean, you just cannot believe how many people can get into a circuit. And the merchandise that's sold is just, it gets into hundreds of thousands of dollars. Okay, let's recap the results for you now. Alan?
Okay, well, a good win for Nelson Piquet and Roberto Marino, first and second for Benetton. Suzuki third from Patrese, Boutsen fifth, and Nakajima sixth in the Tyrrell. And that brings the Drivers' Championship now. Of course, Ayrton Senna has won the 1990 World Drivers' Championship. From Alain Prost, Gerhard Berger is still third. Nelson Piquet moves up to fourth. From Terry Boutsen, who's in fifth, and Nigel Mansell's in sixth place. McLaren Honda, 118 from Ferrari 100. So there's still a possibility that Ferrari may be able to overtake them in the Constructors' Championship at Adelaide. They're leading Benetton Ford, who's in third place. Williams Renault fourth, Tyrrell Ford fifth, and Lola Lamborghini in sixth.
It's waiting now for the champagne to be sprayed. Well, I don't think we can hang around. The satellite has unfortunately gone there now, and that does happen on some of the overseas coverages. 1 minute you're there, next minute the plug is pulled. So I guess a lot of support will be there for, of course, Suzuki with his third place. I think that's the first time that a Japanese has been on the podium. Would that be right?
Exactly. And when you said we can't see the champagne being thrown around, perhaps we'll see a bit of sake instead.
Okay, well, I hope you've enjoyed our exclusive coverage of the Japanese Grand Prix. Now, don't forget Australia's big day coming up. That's on the 4th of November with our live coverage of the Adelaide Formula One Grand Prix. Really is a super week. Don't miss it. So on behalf of Alan Jones, we'll see you in the...
Festa brasileira com o título de campeão do mundo de Ayrton Senna, com o primeiro lugar de Nelson Piquet, o segundo lugar de Roberto Moreno. Uma festa japonesa também, apesar de tudo, devido à presença no pódio de Aguri Suzuki. Mas uma grande decepção pelo que aconteceu com os McLaren Honda e com os Ferrari, sobretudo com o Ferrari de Alain Prost. Mesmo aqui à frente da cabine temos um japonês com uma bandeira brasileira. Ele acaba por saudar Nelson Piquet e Roberto Moreno, quando certamente ele tinha trazido esta bandeira para saudar o título de campeão do mundo de Ayrton Senna. Entretanto, antes de ligarmos aqui do Japão, uma notícia que pode ser interessante e certamente interessa aos portugueses. Enzo Coloni tem mantido ultimamente contactos com Pedro Matos Chaves na sequência do teste realizado pelo piloto português no Estoril ao volante do Coloni de Fórmula 1, para que Matos Chaves venha a ser o piloto da equipa no Grande Prémio da Austrália. Nada está garantido. Coloni disse-nos ontem que o piloto que preferia era Matos Chaves, que havia 95% de possibilidade de que isso acontecesse. No entanto, restam ainda algumas conversações e resta saber se Matos Chaves se arriscará a fazer a sua estreia ou a tentar a sua estreia na Fórmula 1 num circuito extremamente difícil como é o de Adelaide, um circuito citadino, com um carro que não se pode considerar verdadeiramente competitivo.
José Miguel, vamos então interromper, agradecemos a tua colaboração neste direto a partir de Suzuka para a transmissão do Grande Prémio do Japão e até uma próxima oportunidade para o senhor espectador do canal 2 da RTP. Muito bom dia.
Bom dia e obrigado pela atenção que prestaram a esta transmissão em direto do circuito de Suzuka.
The track, a sad monument to an unsatisfactory conclusion to a battle which had raged all season long. The new world champion was unrepentant, so too was his boss Ron Dennis.
Ayrton Senna, I've heard that you've recently run the World Championship. Have you got something to say about this?
It's over. I think for sure I want to win the race today. In the same way I won in '88 to win the championship. Unfortunately, it went wrong on the first corner. There was a big risk. I had nothing to lose on the first corner. I want to win, and I went for a gap in inside on the first corner. Alan didn't see it and just closed the door, and we ended up touching. That's too bad for the championship because I'm sure the race would have been full of excitement. But last year I lost in a similar manner towards the end of the race instead of the beginning, and this year went wrong for him. In a race like this, where you're fighting for the championship, you have to go for everything. And as it happened in many other occasions in the past, there have been accidents in the first corner. I was on pole. Prost did a better start, but on the first corner I was coming faster than him. I had a better engine acceleration, and there was a gap. I went for it. He closed the door, and then was nothing I could do to avoid the contact. If he had not closed the door, nothing would have happened, and we would have continued racing. But unfortunately, he closed the door, and I could not avoid the contact.
Well, I'm very happy because it's more than 2 years that, more than 3 years that I win a race. And also more than that, I'm very happy because enjoying me, my old countrymate Alberto that start motor race together with me, and I could enjoy the team and finish second behind me and make me and the team very happy. I was expecting a lot of more challenges from Williams, and we did a very bad warm-up training this morning because I stopped in the circuit. I didn't know exactly how my car could be in the race. Luckily my car was quite good. And I was waiting for Patrese or Boots and give a little bit challenge, but it was very easy. And like this, I tried to save my tires most I could. I could not challenge Mansell in front of me. In that case, I didn't have any wheel spin in the corner, in the slow corner, and saved my tire. Didn't have a pit stop, and that's it.
I just have to thank you, the whole team, because even this morning on the warm-up lap to go into the grid, I had to swap cars and go into the T car. The car was perfect from the start. They tried to do the seat and everything as close as they could to my car. I still had to drive with Nelson's brake pedal that has a lip, which was hurting my foot a little bit every time I brake. But that didn't take me to any mistakes, and luckily I came to the end. I'd like to dedicate this second place in this race to Alessandro Nannini, who I believe is getting better every day and has a spirit high. And I pray for him that God is with him and to make him better.
So Nelson Piquet wins in Japan with a superb second place for his protégé and new teammate Roberto Moreno. A fine third place and first ever podium position for Aguri Suzuki, third, with the Williams Renaults of Riccardo Patrese and Thierry Boutsen fourth and fifth, and Japan's second driver Satoru Nakajima taking sixth place. Ayrton Senna wins his second World Championship, albeit not the way he would have liked, with Alain Prost second, a reversal of 1989 after their second successive Japanese Grand Prix collision. But the battle for third place goes to Australia, with Gerhard Berger only 5 points ahead of Nelson Piquet, followed by Thierry Boutsen and Nigel Mansell. McLaren win their third successive Constructors' Championship and their fifth in 7 years. A magnificent achievement. But the competition is getting closer. Ferrari second and Benetton up to third past Williams as the championship scene moves to Adelaide in 2 weeks' time for the final round in Australia.